Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we have always held that the intelligence cooperation between the United States and the United Kingdom is unique in the world, of immense value to both countries, and that its disruption would have serious consequences for our national security. And I echo the tribute paid to the security services by the Foreign Secretary in his statement. At the same time, we have consistently argued for full investigation of all credible allegations of UK complicity in torture, and for the government to find a way in this particular case to balance the needs of national security with the needs for justice and accountability in our democratic society. And we therefore welcome today's judgment, which upholds the principle of control and the need for openness in this particular case. The alleged treatment of Binyam Mohammed, described in the 7 paragraphs now released by the Foreign Office, is utterly unacceptable, and the alleged treatment described in the US court judgment in December so dramatically unacceptable that these things, if true, are not only morally wrong, but harm our efforts to combat terrorists, play into the hands of their propagandists, and weaken rather than strengthen our national security. We've always believed on this side of the House that the principle of control could be upheld while seeking an exception in this case from the United States. The Foreign Secretary will recall that I put it to him in the House a year ago this week that the government could have positively asked the United States for permission to publish these paragraphs. If they had done so, and if the United States had agreed, we would have arrived at the same outcome as today's court judgment, without a further year of legal proceedings, more quickly and more smoothly, and in a way that left the government less open to the attack that it was withholding from the public evidence of complicity in torture. And doesn't the fact that the relevant information has been published anyway in the United States strengthen our case that this would have been the right course of action a year ago? In other respects, we agree with the statement made by the Foreign Secretary, particularly on maintaining the principle of control of intelligence, which indeed the court ruling reaffirms and which we fully support. The Foreign Secretary has long argued that the intelligence sharing relationship would be damaged by the release of these paragraphs. Is it still his view that that relationship will be damaged now that the information has been published? Can he say whether there are any other cases pending involving allegations of torture in which he expects the principle to be challenged? And in the light of the failed Detroit bomb attack and the serious threat at the moment to both our countries from terrorism, can he assure the House that the sharing of information at this critical time has not been affected in any way? Have any other countries with which we share intelligence warned that they will reconsider that sharing, reconsider the basis on which they share information in the light of today's developments? My final set of questions, Mr. Speaker, concerns the overriding need to draw a line under this episode and restore the UK's moral authority in the matter of allegations of complicity of torture. As the court ruling states, the rejection of torture has a constitutional resonance for the British people which cannot be overestimated. Many of us have criticised the use of extraordinary rendition and the possibility that it can sometimes lead to torture in a third country. The court ruling in the United States, which was decisive in making the Court of Appeal here change its view on publication, states unequivocally that as a matter of fact, Binyam Mohammed was tortured over a period of 2 years. Is this a statement the government now accepts? The Foreign Secretary has confirmed that the police are currently investigating possible criminal misconduct in the case of Binyam Mohammed. Will he confirm whether there are additional investigations into other parallel cases and how many cases the Attorney General is reviewing? Mr. Speaker, this case has come to epitomise the challenge of international terrorism and the way that we deal with it. And however difficult this challenge is, we must be clear that winning the battle against the perpetrators of terrorism and their ideas requires moral as well as military strength. The government must be able to assure the country and the world that a line has been drawn, that we are far more confident that allegations of complicity in torture cannot be made against the United Kingdom in the future, and that all the necessary lessons of this episode have now been learnt.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I concur with the right honourable gentleman that this case has come to symbolise or epitomise some of the most difficult issues that were raised by the terrorist campaign over the last 9 years, since September the 11th, and has also come to symbolize some of the key judgments that need to be made about how to ensure that our values and our security are brought together. It's absolutely the case that the shared commitment across the House against torture and in favor of meeting all of our commitments in respect of cruel or inhuman treatment are a vital part of making this a safe country. Far from being an undermining of it, they go to the heart of it. And they also go to the heart of what we are seeking to defend. He queried the decision not to, what I called last year, launch a campaign for the release of the documents in the United States. And he's right, we did not launch a campaign for the US to release the documents, although we were absolutely clear that they must be released to the defense counsel of Mr. Mohammed, as indeed they were. He said he thought the same outcome would have been achieved if we had launched a campaign and it has succeeded. That's not entirely the case, because obviously the commitments that the court has made today about the control principle would not have been made in those circumstances, and the commitments and comments that the court has made are valuable and important in that respect. I also said to him last year, and I stick by it today, that the United States administration under President Obama have shown absolutely clearly their commitments in respect of anything that resembles torture or inhuman treatment, that they are reviewing all of the cases, and they have clearly decided so far not to release the documents. The paragraphs released today are summaries of the American intelligence that we hold, not the actual documents. And so I don't think it would have been right for us to launch such a campaign. Apart from anything else, it would have suggested a degree of uncertainty about the commitments that the US administration have made, which I think would not be merited. He asked a very important question, the right honourable gentleman asked a very important question about any chilling or constraining effect that this case might be having or have had on intelligence sharing or have in the future. And that is obviously something that is of grave concern to me and to the government and to the whole country. I said in my statement that we would be working with the US administration, not just in the State Department, but across all aspects of the US government, to analyse this judgment, to understand its implications, to draw attention to the commitments that the court makes in respect of the control principle, and also to discuss with the United States how we continue to defend that principle in the future. I am absolutely clear that it's an important job for me and for my colleagues to minimise any potential effect on the intelligence sharing relationship, not least given the recent events that show how important it is. But it is too early to come to this House and say that there will be no such effect. We need to work to ensure that is the case. The fact that the Court of Appeal have so clearly said that it was the disclosures in a US court that led them to make their decision today that the 7 paragraphs should be published is obviously a very material aspect to any discussion about whether or not the control principle has been breached. He also asked about what the judgments of fact that the district court made in the United States. We await the US government's view on whether they are indeed matters of fact. They have not yet corroborated that or committed to that. But we obviously recognise that as far as the court is concerned, they have been established as a matter of fact, and it is not for us to query the judgment of the US court in that respect. Let me conclude on the following position, Mr. Speaker. One key aspect of any lessons that will be drawn or any conclusions that will arise or consequences that will arise from this case concerns the following 3 allegations that have no truth at all. One allegation is that there is no oversight of the security services in this country. That is wrong. The second allegation is that it is our policy, if not to torture or to commit acts of inhuman treatment ourselves, but to be complicit in them. That is not true. And it is also not true to allege that where possible wrongdoing occurs, it is covered up. This case shows very clearly, both in the case of the work of the Attorney General and of the courts, that this country is committed to uphold all of its commitments, and it does so for very good reason.
His statement and echo his support for our excellent security services and for the importance of our close relationship with our American allies. But, Mr. Speaker, when one of the most senior judges in the land openly criticises the Foreign Secretary and his legal representatives for accusing other judges of being irresponsible and then dismisses his appeal, the Foreign Secretary should surely be rather more contrite when he comes to the House to make the statement today. Can I say immediately to the Foreign Secretary that we on these benches also respect the control principle for the way foreign intelligence is handled, but unlike him and like the right honourable gentleman, the member for Richmond, we believe it was a duty of Her Majesty's government to ask the American authorities at the highest level if they would release this information. Given the gravity of the accusations and the gravity of the information that is now being published, one would have thought that was exactly the right thing to do, Mr. Speaker. But can I bring the Foreign Secretary to the content of the 7 paragraphs that he's been forced to publish today? Is it not now clear that the British authorities knew that the United States were using torture techniques against Binyan Mohammed? Will the Foreign Secretary now tell the House what steps the British government took at the time to deplore that use of torture? Will the Foreign Secretary now tell the House what steps the British government took to ensure Britain was not complicit with that torture at the time? Will the Foreign Secretary guarantee today that at no stage in this case was Britain in breach of either our domestic or international obligations on torture? Mr. Speaker, anyone who has followed this case closely, including Evan